everyone. As you can probably tell, I'm home now after being in Germany for almost 6 weeks, studying abroad with the University of Arizona in Leipzig. It's great to be home. I've missed you all so much. In this video log, I want to share with you my favorite part of my Germany trip. Laupheim. Many of you already know my story, but for those of you who don't, I'll share a small part of it with you right now. My great uncle was Carl Laemmle, the founder of Universal Studios in Hollywood, California. And yes, I realize that even after having said that, many of you still have never heard of him. Carl Laemmle started one of the biggest movie studios in the world. He won a very important Supreme Court case against Thomas Edison that changed the movie industry forever. Most importantly though, he granted more than 300 affidavits during World War II so that Jewish people could escape the Holocaust. Laupheim, Germany is where Carl Laemmle was from, and he spent his childhood and his young adult life in Laupheim until he emigrated to America at only 17 years old. So here's a little background on the Laemmle family. Carl Laemmle's parents had 13 children. However, only 5 of them survived. Within 1 month, there was a terrible epidemic of scarlet fever that killed 8 of Carl's brothers and sisters. The remaining children were Joseph, Siegfried, Carl, Caroline, and Louis Laemmle. The youngest brother, Louis, was my great-grandfather. So as you can probably imagine, visiting Laupheim was a wonderful experience that I will remember for the rest of my life. Knowing that I was in a place that my grandparents called home and loved and visited often, even after immigrating to America, gave me a wonderful feeling of connection to my roots. Gabi Bayer, a longtime friend of the Laemmle family and the author of several books about Carl Laemmle, in addition to working on the Carl Laemmle Museum project and various other remembrances of Carl Laemmle, invited me to stay in her home in Laupheim. I brought along my good friend Leanne, who also studies the German language and has been taking classes with me for 4 semesters now. Gabi picked us up at the train station in Ulm and then drove us to her house in Laupheim. So we freshened up, had a quick wardrobe change, and then we headed off to our first experience, the Carl Laemmle musical, Makin' Hollywood. Although the musical was entirely in German, with my newly acquired German vocabulary and my knowledge of the family history and Carl's story, I was able to follow along just fine. There were actually several scenes that moved me to tears. The scene of Carl's mother talking to young Carl about losing so many children. When she mentioned my great-grandfather Louis's name, I cried. At the end, I was called up on stage and I was so scared that I would be asked questions in German. But as it turned out, I was only asked to join in the singing of the Kinderfest song, a song that my ancestors would have sang since 1926 when Kinderfest began. Gabi allowed me to interview her on camera and to ask her about all of the things that she's done to preserve the memory of Karl Laemmle. And her response was that she and her late husband, Udo, had hosted guests of the Laemmle family in Laupheim for very many years. She and her husband have written essays and books about Karl Laemmle. They've worked together on the Karl Laemmle Museum in Laupheim. And their most recent book is called Karl Laemmle from Laupheim to Hollywood. It's a historical picture and storybook, and it also includes both English and German texts. I also wanted to mention that Udo and Gabi's book, Karl Laemmle from Laupheim to Hollywood, has been sponsored by the Producers Alliance in Berlin and by NBC Universal in Los Angeles and the Sparkhouse Group in Stuttgart. My friend Leanne and I spent the day with Gabi at the Lake of Constance. We walked through the Altstadt and had ice cream by the waterfront. We boarded a boat and we took a short cruise where we saw 3 countries, Switzerland, Austria, and Germany.
Kirschen.
My favorite.
Here are the Kirschen. You see, Kirschen, frische Kirschen.
Wir essen frische Kirschen.
Kirschen. So Gabi told us that there was this special place that she wanted to take us, a place that my great aunt Carla loved to visit when she traveled to Germany. It was a beautiful church in a very small village called Steinhausen.
Go, Gabi, go, Gabi, go.
No, it's 70.
Oh, no.
It's 70.
And there it
It's going
is.
too fast to be bicycle driven.
This is a
Must be
tiny
motorized.
German car. What's it called?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Never
It looks
said.
homemade.
It
There's
looks
a
homemade.
person inside, a real
Yeah,
person.
I think it's homemade.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe it'll turn and then you can see.
I
it
want to
from
see the
side view.
front. I want to see the windows. I want to see the tiny person in the tiny.
There's a normal sized person.
I want to believe there's a tiny
It
person
looks like
in the
an
tiny car.
An insect on wheels. Doesn't it?
Oh my goodness. Oh, it looks like it's blowing back and forth in the wind.
It certainly is not going very fast.
How
It's
fast can
going
one
so
go in a
fast.
tiny car?
And look, the tiny
Oh, we're gonna stop.
wheels,
Good.
the ti-
Gabi.
go. No, I can't.
Oh,
Go faster.
After a wonderful day at the Lake of Constance and seeing the most beautiful village church in the world, we ended the day with an evening meal at the historic Ikson, Carl Laemmle's favorite restaurant in Laupheim. And then next we walked down the street to Carl Laemmle's Geburtshaus. And Geburtshaus is a German word for birth house. It's the house that he was born and grew up in. It's preserved now, and actually the front door is the same front door that was there 100 years ago. So not only was it the home where Carl Laemmle was born, but that means also it was the home where my great-grandfather Louis Laemmle was born, and where my great-uncles Joseph and Siegfried and my great-aunt Caroline was also born. It was a very special feeling of connection being there, and special to know it's been preserved for over 100 years. So from there, we saw several memorials to Carl Laemmle, making us realize the work that Laupheim has been doing to keep his memory alive. The Carl Laemmle High School, Udo Bayer played a big role in its naming, and a memorial fountain of Carl Laemmle in the city center. The Carl Laemmle Museum in Laupheim is full of the history of Carl Laemmle and of Universal Studios.
Und im Regen?
Ich ging in der ganzen Stadt.
Ausflug, because it's a trip.
Für den Ausflug in den Harz. Mit hohen Schuhen.
Mit hohen Schuhen?
In hohen Schuhen.
So from there, it was just a very short drive to Ulm. I had no idea the adventures that awaited us in Ulm. We walked through the city streets. We saw the beautiful city hall from the 1500s and many other historic buildings. But above all else, the Ulmer Münster is unbelievable. Leanne and I climbed all 700 steps to the very top. had to get back to Laupheim because we were going to a Heimatfest parade. I didn't know what that was, but when we got there, I saw a really cool Carl Laemmle float, and they handed me some flowers and told me to climb on, and off we went. Gabi had a wedding in Munich on Saturday, so we stayed with a friend of hers who took us for a picnic at a place called Blautopf. The water in Blautopf apparently is really, really deep, and professional divers have been trying to explore the water for many years, but as of yet, no one has been successful. We also visited a museum there where we saw the oldest sculpture known to man. It's 40,000 years old, and it's called the Venus. Sunday was our last day in Laupheim, but it was no ordinary Sunday. It was the annual Heimatfest and Kinderfest in Laupheim that's been happening since 1926. Yes, I saw 2 parades in 5 days. We had special reserved seating in the grandstands with the city officials, so I videoed the whole thing so that I could share it with you. I hope that you enjoy it almost as much as I did. Be sure to watch for the Carl Laemmle float. that's all for now. Stay tuned for my last vlog where I graduate from my Deutsch course and I head down south to the lake to finish out my amazing almost 6 weeks in Germany. Tschüss!